Hi guys, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you the Turkana Rig Jig. Now a few people have asked me to put a video online saying that they have problems putting it together, wondering how you actually make rigs on it and the uses. So I'm going to put this together, show you a few that I actually do. I find them very useful for crimped up clip downs. Especially, it saves you hanging them one by one from the door frame or wherever you hang them from. You could make up quite a few at a time. So don't actually think that the only use for rig jigs is for glued rigs, because you can use them for crimp rigs and they are really quick. Literally set up 12, 14, 20 rigs and crimp them all up at the same time. The same with your glued rigs, using your glue tubing as your crimp and gluing them up, but making it so much quicker than the old days of having to do them on a small little continental setup where you glued up literally three swivels, beads and tubes at a time. So I'll fast forward through assembly, which is really easy. You've literally got two legs which have got a larger box section hole there. You'll notice you've got one with a smaller box section hole there. This is the smaller one. Quite simple. The smaller box hole goes onto the extension and the larger holes obviously fit the main body of the rig jig. You've got the same with your guides. You've got two of those with the larger diameter for this end, and you've got one here to go on the smaller. I beg your pardon, you have two to go on the smaller extension. So plenty of aids there to keep your rigs nice and tight and straight. You'll notice also I don't use springs. Now they do come supplied with springs and a lot of people find them very handy, but because mono's got quite a stretch to it, when I'm gluing rigs especially, I will cut them maybe a little shorter and actually make sure that they're really stretched over. That's actually quite important with glued rigs, because if you're gluing up a rig, always do it under tension. If you imagine casting out a glued rig, if it hasn't been built under tension, the glue will crack and snap where you've actually glued up your crimps on the rig. So always do them under tension. As I say, I tend to cut mine short and tighten them up on the rig jig. Others like to actually use the springs or even hair bands and get the tension with that. I find it doesn't stretch quite as good as using the stretch on the line, literally. You've also got a little tray, self-explanatory. That little box section goes in there, just slides in. It's somewhere to put all your extra bits. I don't know whether you're like me, but if I don't use this tray, my beads, my crimps, my rig tube and even my glue ends up all over the table, and 9 times out of 10 on the floor. So handy little tray to put on the rig jig and keep all your bits up together. So we'll assemble this up very quickly, and then you'll notice on the next part of the video the rig jig will miraculously change colour. That's only because my personal rig jig is an old one and it's the old colours, not quite as striking as the new black and orange that Turkana have brought out recently. So here you go guys, let's put it together and we'll get on and make some rigs. Okay. So here we go. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, only 9 on here. I prefer to work with slightly wider gaps, but you could probably actually fit double that amount on there. So basically, instead of hanging them from the door, get them all set up on the rig jig. Take your bottom snood, crimp it up. I always leave a little gap there. Crimp that one up. And then your top snood, pull him down onto the clip. Press your spring to give it plenty of tension. And crimp that one up Obviously let the tension off the spring before you attempt to crimp up the top. Like so. Now, I actually like using these little jewellery pliers. I don't know whether it's going to... They've got a couple of options there. I tend to only crimp up smaller rigs with smaller crimps, so obviously they're not going to be any good for your heavy duty things, but they're soft enough that they don't crush the crimp up and flatten the ends of the crimp. Always try, if you can, to crimp into the centre of the crimp so that you've got either end of the crimp open and not squashed against the line, which is where a lot of people do actually slip up. If you crimp the whole of the crimp down against the line and flatten it, then if it does happen to twist or turn, you will break your line on the sharp end of the crimp. So always remember when you're crimping to get your pliers and crimp in the centre of the crimp. So there you have it, the 2-up clip downs on the rig jig. Far easier than doing them one by one. Easy to lay them out and set them up, crimp them up, and you're sorted, and much quicker. I tend to leave a bit of space in. There's probably 12 I think on there. You could do them closer together, but I like to get the pliers in. Basically that's it. Let's move on to the glued rigs. Okay guys, so there you have it. We've sorted the crimped rigs on the rig jig, and as you can see they were pretty quick to put together and certainly makes life easier on these clip downs. Next is the glued rigs. Now, as you can probably see, I tend to put all of my components on the line before I actually start to make the rigs, and then chop them up individually, obviously putting a swivel on the top end and my lead clip on the bottom end. So what you'll need is rig glue, some glue tubing, which is a different material to rig tubing. The glue tubing is specifically made to glue, so just be aware of that and get the right tubing, guys. Some little micro beads, and with these I've tended to go quite fine because I want some really light rigs for the summer. As you can see, these little micro beads are minute. I'm not sure whether that's focused or not. And then obviously your main line, your line for your body, and some tiny swivels. Those are 22s. I don't know if you can see that there. Let's see if we can bring it down underneath. Yep, size 22 swivels. Now I've managed to spread all these little beads all over the table. So basically you thread these up exactly the same as you would a crimped rig. So you've got your glue tube, you've got a bead, you've got your swivel, a bead and the glue tube. So I thread all that up before I even start to make the rigs, and then chop them down one by one and maybe do probably a dozen on the rig jig at once. But it's certainly, it is better than the old days where I used to actually use a little tiny continental gluing station that just allowed me to do one tube bead, swivel bead tube at a time, and then obviously have to wait for it to dry even with the activator. So these days I do them all up like this, chop them down to the length I want and set them all up on the rig jig. So let's finish there and get some of these chopped up, put some lead clips on the bottom of them and put them on the rig jig to let you see where we go from there. So here you have it. I'll try to come down and let you see. These are actually 2 up, 1 down, so there's my top swivel, and this first bar contains all of the top snood swivels. Come farther down and my second snood down, all sat in there nice and neatly, and down onto the bottom. As you can see, I've now tied on the lead clips and the bottom trace components, sorry, snood components, are all sat there. So that is 10, 11 I think actually, 2 up-1-downs, all set up nicely, ready to glue. Right, okay guys, I'm kind of hoping that you can see that I've actually put the rig tube here with a little gap with the swivel and the beads, and I've pushed the swivel and the beads right up to the middle, hoping that I'll get no seepage down that will glue the swivel and beads, otherwise it defeats the object really. So it's always a good idea to put this gap. I mean, I like having a gap there anyway, I hate them squashed up, but to put quite a gap. And I use the outside of the bars as a guide as to where my glue tubing should go. And so I get a little bit of glue, just enough to drop. A drop of glue, there's a little bit too much on there, at the back end of the rig tube. That way around, hopefully it'll seep through the glue tube, I should keep saying, and not seep farther down and glue this area here, which defeats the object a little bit, because you don't want your swivels and your beads fixed. Okay, just like I say, the tiniest blob, and it does hold very well. After all, they're light rigs for light fishing. It's not like you're going to be casting these miles and catching huge bass and cod and congers and what have you on them. They are purely for light scratching. Okay, I'm not going to bore you to tears and let you see every single bit of glue that I'm blobbing on there, so I'll get on and get the rest of them done and get back to you in a minute. So there you have it. That's all of the components glued up and waiting to dry and finish and put snoods on. So there you go guys, easy. And as I say, there's 11 rigs sat on there. It would have taken me hours to do 11. That probably, at most, to set them up on the jig and actually glue them up together, get the spacings right, maybe an hour. But I did have the components pre-threaded as I showed you at the beginning, so a little bit longer, but an awful lot quicker. So much quicker than doing them one by one. So hopefully that'll help you guys. You know, that isn't just what the rig jigs can be used for. Just plain 3 up or 2 up-1-downs with crimps, not necessarily the clip downs. It just makes rig making so much easier, so much quicker. And when you've got a lot of rigs to do, believe you me, it does save you some time, and it takes the pain out of making up hundreds of rigs. So thanks guys, and we'll catch you later. Bye.